2020 was the craziest year of weather I've ever experienced. Here's why. Disclaimer, all events were witnessed in eastern Massachusetts, a place we'll call Middlesex County. First up, we have January 12th, which was the warmest January day everywhere. Not everywhere, of course, but in Boston it was. The high was 74, smashing the record of 61 for the day. It was a monthly record being broken by 4 degrees. And even look at the temperatures at midnight. We're in the mid 60s in January. Simply unbelievable. In fact, Boston actually spent upwards of 24 hours above the previous record high. It was warm for that long. Next up, we have March 28th, which was the first big severe weather event the region saw, despite really not being expected for severe weather at all. You can see we actually had hail reports as big as golf ball sized. You're probably wondering, how was this happening in March? Was it really warm and really unstable? Well, we did have 2000 MU Cape above a big inversion, and we actually had temperatures in the 30s while we were getting at times golf ball sized hail near Worcester. So a very, very unusual setup with some elevated supercells. Next up, we had our first big high wind event of a few this year on April 13th. You can see the very intense low level jet with over 80 to 90 knots of wind a mile up. A pretty bold forecast from NWS Boston for maximum gusts. We did have a lot of power outages, and Blue Hill gusted to around 85 miles per hour. Spring 2020 had more snow than the winter did. This is only partly true, and it's not true everywhere, but you can see from some of these few 3 or 4 major snow events we had in April and even May. It was a very snowy spring after one of the mildest winters ever. So just kind of flip-flopped. A really, really weird few months. And this really did culminate on May 9th, a day that we had wind chills in the 20s with snow as the sun was setting the same time it does in August. So just a very, very weird day and what was a pretty weird spring overall. From snow to severe weather in less than a week, May 15th brought the first enhanced risk of the year, first major severe weather event. It was a widespread squall line bringing a ton of wind damage. We actually had a microburst one town to my north, and it sounded a bit like a tornado as it was coming in. Some people saw even stronger winds. June 28th was only the third flash flood emergency ever issued by NWS Boston and the first non-hurricane issuance. Look at Norwood Hospital, just completely flooded out. It was closed for months after this. It was definitely also a day that had some severe weather. Look at this, a 2-inch hail, 70 mile per hour severe thunderstorm warning that I was under. Here are some observations from Logan Airport showing we had, in some cases, 12 to 14 consecutive hours of thunder. I've never heard so much thunder in one day in my life. July 2nd was a lot more localized, but still a pretty impactful weather event. This was one of my earlier, quote, storm chases that I ever went on, and we intercepted a gorgeous sunset supercell, and it produced microbursts about 2 towns to my north. July 5th featured some rare but intense nighttime supercells. The day started off with a chase, local storm spotting at the pond, as I was just getting used to beginning a chase at this point. I eventually got chased home by this mini supercell earlier in the evening. But the main show arrived around 9 or 10 p.m. You can see the surface boundary with the wind shift from a bit of a backdoor cold front. And then look at these supercells coming out of New Hampshire into eastern Massachusetts. Just some classic hook echoes you'll see with rotation couplets at times. And WS Boston was pretty close on if they wanted to tornado warn this for my house. They did not, but they were definitely close. Eventually, these things began to go alpha dominant, and the RFD was truly beastly. At my house, we were getting wind-driven pennies. 60 mile per hour winds. We got hit by the first supercell. The rotation went right overhead. We lost power, and then a secondary supercell right on its tracks hit us 10 minutes later with again wind-driven, maybe 60 mile per hour small hail. And then on the backside, one of the most beautiful images you'll see, a discrete supercell in clear air with the moon and stars illuminating it. Now, of course, it wouldn't be 2020 without a tropical event. It was Tropical Storm ECS, the main one we had. We were on its eastern side, the windy and at times even tornadic feeling side.
Oh my god. Tornado warning EAS. Dude, first of the day.
We did have several tornado warnings in my county, nothing touchdown thankfully, and of course standing in some 50 to 60 mile per hour winds like a weather person does. Just a very, very fun day. August 27 featured the second and last enhanced risk of the year. This was a bit more of a Western Mass and Connecticut show. But look at that, a lot of wind damage, even some tornadoes in Connecticut. And you can see here definitely a few pretty intense supercells were coming through the Hartford metro. Probably the GOAT fall severe weather event period, at least in my lifetime. This is, of course, the October 7th derecho, the first derecho in 25 years in New England, and what a time to break that streak. Everybody, pretty much everybody, saw severe wind and damage from this. Here in my area, we had a 70 mile per hour severe thunderstorm tag, obviously verified. Look at that, just a beauty, low top storm out of clear air. Here's some video from a potato from my house as it hit. I unfortunately was not home at the time, big sad, but there's some video from where I live. Here you can see as it was coming through my area, we actually had an EF0 tornado one town to my south, that's the closest in a minute tornadoes coming to where I live. Peak wind gusts, we had sig wind in a lot of places. Look at Worcester ASOS, 70 mile per hour wind gust. My goodness, look at the power outage map, looking more like a category 1 hurricane. I can't remember ever having a power outage map, anything like this from a convective event. Probably the greatest October severe weather event. 3 weeks later, the greatest October snow ever. Only in October, only in 2020 we would do this. Look at that. Snow over peak foliage in New England. Here's a photo from where I live. We had half a foot of snow in my town, as did a lot of people. Pretty well anticipated event, and it just looked crazy. Snowtober vibes for sure. November 15th brought an impressive severe squall line hitting the region entirely after dark. Of course, a severe thunderstorm watch was issued, and this verified very well. Almost the entire region saw severe thunderstorm warnings issued, and of course, we did have the famous Lamar Jackson versus squall line moment. Just a week later, another memorable November severe weather event. This one was the first 2 November tornado warnings ever issued by NWS Boston, primarily a Cape and Islands event. And it stayed active. Just a week after that, we had a major high wind event on the last day of November, bringing a blizzard to parts of Ohio and the Great Lakes. Meanwhile, for us, we were in the 60s with a wind-driven rain and even severe weather. Of course, the photographs were insane. We did have some rotating convective showers, we'll say. Strong winds, of course. Blue Hill Observatory maximum gust was 81 miles per hour. Can't have a big year without one of these. It's nor'easter time. December 5th was one of the more pretty ones we will see on satellite. Major snow event for Worcester County, almost exclusively. They were getting a foot of snow. Meanwhile, on Cape Cod, it was in the 50s, and they got into the eye of the storm with sunshine. Well, it can't be the craziest year of weather I've ever had without one of these. The one actual really cool snow accumulating event we had, a widespread 12 to 18 inches in southern New England, but Pennsylvania and New York were the jackpot. They got in some places 40 inches. An appropriate ending for the craziest year of weather I've ever seen might just be the craziest Christmas weather I've ever seen. The Christmas storm, we'll call it. Advertised as a wind event, it was a wind event. Look at some of these forecasted gusts from NWS Boston. That morning, I woke up to a squall line with a temperature in the low to mid 60s. We got 3 to 4 inches of rain for the day. Truly an insane event I did not know was possible in the month of December.